Hey, what's up, lawn care nuts? All right, today is a big day. We're not gonna do any fancy intros, no fancy music, no fancy editing to start. We are gonna start right into the content because today's content is all about Milorganite versus Ringer Lawn Restore. It's the battle of organic fertilizers, so let's go throw her down. All right, so here is the battleground. It's Frankenstein. Of course it is, right? If I'm gonna be throwing down inordinate amounts of fertilizer in order to test them against one another, I might as well do it here on Frankenstein, right? So before we do that though, we got some dew on the ground still, but we gotta get her cleaned up. She's just a little bit long and ragged, so let's do that first. So I just want to stress, guys, neither one of these is a bad choice. They're just different. So what I'm going to do today is arm you with information to help you make a logical choice on which one to use at what time for your particular situation at your home site. Okay, so the first thing we need to explore is the analysis, because that's really why you buy fertilizer, right? Is because of the analysis. If you don't know that, that's really why we buy it. These are both organics, and what it comes down to when you've decided to go organic, then is the analysis. In other words, what's in the fert?
All right, guys, so when we talk about the analysis, we're talking about the three numbers on the bag. The first being nitrogen, the second being phosphorus, and the third being potassium. Both have nitrogen in common, of course, different concentrations, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that when we get to the pricing comparison. But for now, realize that nitrogen is something we're going to leave to the side because they've both got it. In that case, then, there are only a couple things that separate the two. The first is that Milorganite does contain some phosphorus. That can be important, especially if you're using it as a starter fertilizer and you need something to help with root development. The phos also makes it a great fall fertilizer. On the other hand, Ringer doesn't have phos, and that can be a good thing, especially if you live in an area where phosphorus is restricted in lawn fertilizers. Milorganite won't even be an option for you, but Ringer will be. Of course, Ringer also has potassium, which is just a good all-around element to help strengthen the lawn. Now, Milorganite does come in strong in the micronutrient department, though, because Milorganite contains iron, and iron is what gives your lawn that deeper green-blue look. Now, there's an element here that we need to explore, and that is what I always say, pounds on the ground. But we're going to talk about that a little bit more when we get to the pricing option. But analysis compared, it's now up to you to make a decision of what's going to work best for your application needs.
Obviously, one of the other considerations is price. What am I going to pay per application? So let me show you how to calculate that, because it's probably a little different than what you think. All right, so you guys hear me use this term a lot. You're going to hear it again. Pounds on the ground. So what are we talking about there?
So the first reaction a lot of people have is, well, Milorganite is cheaper because I can get it for $12 a bag.
Yes, that's true. And so you can see here, Ringer is $28.63 with free shipping. And that's a 25-pound bag. So you guys know me, I always try to make my math easy. So we're gonna do over here, we're gonna do Ringer, $29 for 25 pounds. And then Milorganite, okay, is we can get that for $12 at Home Depot, right? At least I can. And that's a 36-pound bag. All right, there we go. Now some of you are like, man, this is stacking up even worse against Ringer when it comes to cost. But hold on a second. Now we have to determine how much nitrogen do we want to get from one application. And typically, we want to get 0.75 pounds or 3/4 pound of nitrogen. That's typically what we're going to be looking for in most cases. You guys have seen me go over that, but for the most part, that's what we want. And that's obviously per 1,000 square feet. So how are we going to get that? Well, that's where the analysis then comes in. And as you'll remember, that Ringer is a 1006, and Milorganite is a 520. So the one that we care about is this one right here. This is the nitrogen. So then the next thing I can determine is how many pounds on the ground am I going to have in order to get my 3/4 pound of nitrogen? Well, in order to get 3/4 pound of nitrogen out of Milorganite, I need 15 pounds per 1,000 square feet, right? Because 15 times 5 is 0.75. So I need 15 pounds of product for one application. And over here, in order to get that, I'm only going to need 7.5 pounds of product in order to get my 3/4. So as you run the math down, you can see that I'm going to need that much product to get 3/4 pounds of nitrogen out of Ringer, and I'm going to need this much product to get 3/4 pound nitrogen out of Milorganite. And then the next piece of math I'm going to do then is, how much am I paying per pound? So 36 pounds at $12. So that means then that this is 33 cents a pound. What is 25 divided by 29?
The answer is 0.86.
And so then this is 86 cents a pound. So now all I have to do is take 7.5 multiplied by 0.86 and 15 multiplied by 0.33. So then that tells me $4.95 per 1,000 square feet. Remember, all this is calculated on a 1,000 square feet. So it's going to cost me $4.95 per 1,000.
6.45.
6.45. So let's move that up. All right, guys, so here's what I know. Milorganite cost me $4.95 per 1,000 square feet, right? Cost me $6.45 per 1,000 square feet. Is Milorganite cheaper? Yes, but it isn't as cheap as you think when you're paying $12 a bag versus $29 a bag. So then let's see, based on a typical lawn. So my lawn out front, as you guys know because I measured it, is 3,800 square feet. So just to make my math easy, like I always say, we're going to say it's 4,000 square feet, right? So then that means to do my lawn, one application of Ringer is going to be 645 times 4. So that means it costs me $25.80 in product, or what we would say in chemical cost, to do an application of Ringer. Same over here, 4,000 square feet. So for my lawn, 4,000 square feet, the difference is $19.80 an app or $25.80 an app. So about a $6 difference for me. You can do the math on your own and see, but again, it's not quite as shocking as when you look at a per bag price of $12.29. Remember, it's pounds on the ground and the fertilizer analysis itself that also factor in when it comes to your application cost.